All right, 8th grade. I promised you guys I'd get you some notes on adverbs today. This shouldn't take too long. There's not a whole lot to really go into this, but you do need to make sure that you study this. I would take notes for yourselves, unless you're planning on reviewing these short little video clips. They are good resources for you, but covering adverbs, unlike adjectives, and I'll do another review here on adjectives. Unlike adjectives, adjectives only describe nouns. Adverbs describe three different things. And if you remember back to the way things are written on our wall in class, you know, there's a pattern to this. If you struggle to remember things, you know, look for patterns. The first thing we always cover is nouns, and then we go into verbs, and then we cover adjectives, and then we usually cover adverbs last. And if you understand this order, it kind of goes from simplest to hardest, in my opinion. The way the modifiers work too, they kind of work down the page. Adjectives describe the nouns. Adverbs, on the other hand, cover the last three on our list. They describe verbs, they can describe adjectives, or other adverbs in the sentence. Okay, now, don't ever think that an adverb can describe itself. It only describes other adverbs in the sentence. Okay, adjectives always had three questions that they answer. Okay, and when we do this, this question thing, it's always about what they're modifying. So when I say what question does it answer, if I had the sentence like the blue kite was in the sky. Okay, it doesn't matter if you can see the rest. Okay, obviously the adjective is blue, but we also have two other adjectives here in the articles, the and the, twice in the sentence. But when I say what question does the adjective answer, it is in regard to what it's modifying. Kite is a noun in the sentence, so kite is being modified. What question does blue answer in relation to kite? Well, that would be, what kind of kite was it? It was a blue kite. Articles point to nouns. So the other one was, which one are we talking about? And then we can also have a very common how many question when we're talking about adjectives. Going back to adverbs, there are 5 questions that you need to remember. I'll do these in letters. The first one is when. We have a where. There's 3 W's if you use that as kind of a way to remember this. When, where, why. There's an H, a how. And then the last one is somewhat the most complicated. It's to what extent or degree. And I'll explain that in a little bit. It's kind of what I would consider like a thermometer type question, something that measures an amount, an extent, or a degree. So if I took the first one, verbs, and I give you a sentence that looked like, say, this. Stacy ran wildly through the halls. Okay. We have a subject, Stacy. What she did was she ran. That's my verb. Starting with the subject verb, always a great idea. Why? Because eventually we're going to be looking at things like adverbs, and adverbs have a relationship with verbs. It's a good thing to know where that verb is. The other thing about adverbs is we know that ly is a very common ending for adverbs, so automatically my eyes are going to wildly. This is the adverb in the sentence, but in order to know that, ly is not enough to guarantee it. Okay, I can say, what is it modifying? It's got to be one of these 3 things. And what question is it answering in regards to one of those 3 things? Is it when, where, how, why, or to what extent? this adverb is modifying ran, and it is telling us how Stacy ran. Okay, so here's an example of an adverb modifying a verb, answering the question of how. If I went to an adjective, here's an example of this. The flowers on the table were very pretty. Okay, I'll make it simple. Okay, pretty isn't anything complicated. Pretty is an adjective. This is standing out to me right away. Okay, what is pretty modifying? Well, it goes all the way back to tell what kind of flowers we have. Okay, that's what makes this an adjective. There it is. What kind again? What kind of flowers? And flowers is not only a noun, but it is the subject of the sentence. The verb here is were. This is a linking verb. And it's very rare for adverbs to ever modify linking verbs. Okay, so that's something to watch out for. But very modifies this adjective. Whoops, I labeled that incorrectly. Which is why this is an adverb. Okay, and this is also one of the examples of to what extent or degree. So when you're dealing with adverbs that modify adjectives or other adverbs, it's usually this one. Okay, it's usually, if I took these two, it's usually this question that you're dealing with. Because I always tell students, imagine if you had like a thermometer of some sort. Okay, now don't think of thermometer in its actual context. A thermometer measures heat, right? Okay, a barometer measures air pressure, if I recall. There's always some sort of gauge that we could measure a degree or an extent, how much something is taking place. And that's what this question is all about. When you look at these types of adverbs, I'm not making a mistake here, I believe they're called intensifiers. It tells to what degree is something pretty. Was it a little pretty? Was it very pretty? Was it extremely pretty? Enormously pretty? Okay, something like that, tells us whether or not we reach this level on the scale or it actually goes up to this level on the scale. The important thing is it answers that question and it is modifying an adjective. Okay, the arrow goes in this direction. It tells more about pretty. Therefore, it's also accomplishing one of the three things that adverbs have to do. And so that would be an example of an adverb modifying an adjective. Well, what about adverbs modifying other adverbs in the sentence? That's, again, probably going to be to what extent or degree. So if I jump over to the back side of this page, one more example. Let's see here. We used the sentence, the adverb wildly already. Let's use that again. Stacy ran extremely wildly through the halls. Same sentence, I added one more word, which probably guides you to where that new adverb is. Again, give me my subject, identify my verb, ran. I could label it as an action verb if I want. Okay. We already said that wildly was an adverb because it told how did Stacy run. She ran wildly. But now, to what extent did her running become wildly, how that she was running wildly? And that is where this intensifier comes in again. Extremely is another adverb, only this time the adverb modifies a different adverb in the sentence. Okay? Now the last thing I'll say about adverbs is that they don't always have to mark or end in ly. Okay, remember the questions? Sometimes you can answer the question of where and locations, or maybe even when. Times can be adverbs. For example, let's see. Tom ran outside. Okay. Tom is a subject. We have an action verb ran. Outside basically tells where he ran. So this has to be an adverb. And notice outside does not end in ly. We don't say he ran outsidely. Okay. It's not answering the question of how he ran. It's telling where he ran. We could say Susie will sing tomorrow for the class, or something to that effect. Okay. Again, subject, we have a verb phrase this time, will sing. Tomorrow tells when she will sing, which makes this an adverb. But again, it doesn't end in ly. Okay? So, basic adverbs, just as a review, what you need to know, they modify 3 different parts of speech: verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. That follows our list down from the second down to the bottom. They answer 5 different questions. You're going to need to remember these. How, why, when, where, to what extent. And if it seems strange that I go in a different order than the way I wrote them, it's because there is kind of a little jingle or rhythm to doing it in that way. And so that's part of the way I remember it as well. How, why, when, where, to what extent. It just flows. And I'll use anything to help me remember whatever I need to remember.